Welcome to West Indies on 99.94, the home of cricket audio. I'm your host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me as ever is my co-host, also from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Mr. Santoki Nagulendran. Today on West Indies on 99.94, we're going to be talking about West Indies' likely journey to the ODI World Cup qualifiers. Santoki, take it away.
Listen, Mashal, West Indian players, they thought they had next June free in the calendar. It was all free to start some holidays, but, it's looking like a long and arduous trip to Zimbabwe for the World Cup qualifiers. This is a result of the 2-1 ODI loss to New Zealand, and also almost just as importantly, the 2-point deduction for a slow over rate in the final ODI against New Zealand, which means that the onus is on Ireland and Sri Lanka to overtake us in the ODI Super League rankings and get direct qualification to the World Cup. So, Mashal, from my perspective, it's not a massive surprise. We were always being optimistic, thinking West Indies could directly qualify for the World Cup. But I guess also the state of our ODI side and the way we've performed recently, especially this year, means it's what we deserve, isn't it? We deserve to qualify, have to go through the qualifiers, I guess.
Yeah, I think it would have been, if we had somehow, I'll say lucked, but if we had somehow lucked our way through automatically, and realistically, Santoki, the only way for us to do that would have been to beat New Zealand 3-0. Even if we'd beaten them 2-1, okay, so we'd be on 98 points now with the 2-point deduction. It would still be likely that one of Ireland, Sri Lanka, or South Africa would probably still catch us anyway. Yes, it would have increased the chances of us maybe miraculously going through to the automatic stage of the ODI World Cup. But as you correctly point out, we don't deserve to be there. Our ODI cricket, particularly in 2022, has been bad. Our ODI cricket since 2015 has just been bad in general. In fact, maybe our ODI cricket over the last 7 to 8 years has been bad. So we don't deserve to be there. And I think it's important, Santoki, that we say this for West Indian fans around the globe to also be realistic. Prior to this New Zealand series, given how we'd played versus Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Ireland this year, why would anybody have expected us to win 2 games versus New Zealand?
Yeah, exactly. And going back to those ODIs, I guess we also, weirdly, in a weird way, we paid the price for honouring our tours. When we went to Bangladesh in early 2021, obviously the Super League had just started, so we didn't know the ramifications, but we essentially threw away 3 ODIs by playing what was a C team in Bangladesh because of COVID withdrawals. So that didn't help us. But then, as you said, we lost to Ireland at home, which for me, once that happened, I was like, okay, we're going to go to the qualifiers. We don't stand a chance, and that looks like happening. But I guess, ironically, against New Zealand, we didn't play too bad, considering a lot of people would have predicted a 3-0 loss. We won the first ODI to stop any records being broken in terms of most ODI losses. We were on the verge of that. And then the second and third one fell away from our grasp. But ironically, considering we've been on for the past few episodes talking about West Indies' lack of strike bowling, we actually bowled New Zealand out in the first 2 ODIs. It was the batting which led us down the path. So it's like a seesaw with West Indies cricket. When one thing goes right, the other thing goes wrong, and we just haven't got that balance in that at the moment. But Mash, where do you want to take it away? I guess before we look at the ramifications for the World Cup, let's look at that series against New Zealand. So we won the first one, bowled New Zealand out for a relatively low score, and chased it with Shamar Brooks playing a valiant innings. But I want to talk about first the additions to the squad. So we got listen, with West Indies cricket, if you told me 2 weeks ago Yannick Correa would be playing ODI cricket for West Indies and starring, I wouldn't know what to say, but that's where we are. So to put it into context for those who aren't familiar sort of with the ins and outs of the domestic scene, Yannick Correa, he's 30 years old. He was part of the Under-19 World Cup squad in 2009-10. He'd played 18, I believe, List A matches throughout the past 12 years. But most importantly, he'd captained the Super 50 emerging side to their surprise win in 2019. as with anything in West Indies cricket, we've talked about it a lot. The pathway just hasn't been there for him. He hasn't been able to make the Trinidad and Tobago side, so he didn't play for them in the Super 50 last year. And he's sort of just been muddling around. He was played first class cricket for Trinidad this year. He was in the A team. And then our desperation for a leg spinner because of Hayden Walsh's Jr.'s failings in the format meant he ended up getting a surprise call up, but he didn't do too bad, Mash.
If I was Hayden Walsh Jr., I'd be sweating right now. Is all I will say on that. Some will look at Yannick Karaya's figures from the last ODI where he did take some licks. I think he bowled 10 overs for 77. I think he got 2 wickets. And yeah, he took a bit of licks. But if you look at his body of work across, I think it was 2, he played 2 in the end, across the, or 3, of the ODIs that he played, he looked, and this is with the greatest respect to Hayden, but he looked like he was bowling more threatening deliveries, leg spin deliveries, than Hayden does. Now, I would need to probably go with an expert and look at every single delivery Yannick Correa bowled, but the eye test to me said, wait a minute, this guy's got more control than Hayden. He's put in 4 out of 6 balls in an over on a spot to ask questions of the opposing batter. Yes, the first 2 ODIs, the tracks were friendly. And we're not going to see tracks that often that are that friendly in generally speaking. But certainly I'd say that Hayden should be sweating a bit with Yannick Karaya's performance. But you make a bigger point there, Santoki, which I think, again, all West Indian listeners need to bear in mind, because we received a few tweets on our Carib Cricket handle saying, how is this guy even in the ODI side? But this is the stage we've now reached. Anybody can get in the ODI side. You just have to show a tiny bit of form at the right time, and you're getting in the ODI side or in West Indies selection in general. Because the key word you used, Santoki, was pathways. There is no set pathway. And I think we've spoken about this before as well. If you're lucky in the Caribbean, you might play 8 List A matches in the whole year. And if you're lucky, you might also play a bit of 40 over club cricket. So really and truly, when we talk about West Indies ODI selection, really and truly, it's about who's ever showing any form in any other format of cricket, because there's no list A cricket to base anybody's selection on. And when you put all of that together, again, I think the conclusion you get, it's no surprise that we lost to New Zealand, lost to India, lost to Bangladesh, lost to Pakistan, lost to Ireland, etc. Because really and truly, what's the pedigree? What's the pedigree we're choosing from when it comes to ODI cricket?
Yeah, 100%. I think, as you rightly said, we don't have a structure. There's no logical choices to come in. Okay, so Hayden Walsh isn't performing. There was no one obvious to step up who had the experience, and we sort of had to just hope that Yannick Correa could make the step up and pluck him out of the blue. Mainly this year, he's been playing first-class games. He hasn't played a List A professional game since 2019, that emerging series. He hadn't had much experience, but we had no other option, so we had to drop him into the ODI side. And that's just, if you look at New Zealand, they've got cover for all positions. So Kane Williamson gets injured, you bring in another batsman. Trent Bolt goes out, you bring in Lockie Ferguson. They've got cover for all positions. With West Indies, we're essentially scrambling in the dark to find players in the region who we think might be able to step up and throw them in at the deep end. So we were never going to beat New Zealand 3-0. As you said, we might have lucked out and managed to get a series win. But ultimately, I think it was a fair reflection that New Zealand did win 2-1. I think there were a few standout performances for us, but second ODI, what were we, 27 for 6 at one point? Chasing, which just sort of highlights our woes in the back. I think Yannick Correa was the top scorer in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he got his maiden ODI 50.
So we had,
listen again. Go on.
We had Carl Mayers for a duck, Shamar Brooks for a duck, Brandon King 2, Pooran got a 2, Jason Holder first ball duck. So that's our top order. Our experienced players are going out like that against the likes of Bolt and Salvi. We never really stood a chance. The difference in quality there, and some would argue the World Cup qualifiers might help restore some confidence. If we're just taking licks against these top ranked nations, we might go to the World Cup qualifiers, win all our games. That gives us momentum heading up into the World Cup. So for me, I think, to be honest, as much as the region will cuss out about us having to go to World Cup qualifiers, it might give us the moral boost that we need.
I mean, you're You're more positive than me. If I had to bet some money right now in August 2022, so the World Cup qualifiers are in March in Zimbabwe in 2020. Is it March? No, no, that might be wrong. When is it? Oh, I can't remember. Oh, June. Sorry, it's June. June 2023 is when the World Cup qualifiers are. If I had to bet my money right now, Santoki, I'm saying we're not even getting out of the World Cup qualifiers. Something would have to drastically change in our but not because we're not good enough. Hear me out. You've actually already given the answer as to why we all struggle to get out of the World Cup qualifiers. The problem is, Santoki, how often is this team able to put together a coherent ODI performance? And when I say coherent, I mean the batting comes off and the bowling comes off. Usually, one of the two suits is going to let us down. So even if you look at the last ODI, we put up 302 or 301. Sorry, I'm not saying that's amazing. I'm not trying to say that, but it's. I mean, on that Barbados track, it probably should have been 330, right? But it was still over 300. Now, at the halfway stage, I could see some people tweeting saying, West Indies might pull off like a rare series victory. And I was like, no, we're going to lose because the probabilities tell you that even if we put up 300, the bowlers probably aren't going to be able to defend 300. And also, unless our bowlers bowl a team out for 300, we're probably not going to be able to chase anything the bowlers. So the first ODI victory we pulled off, yeah, that was fantastic and well done to the team, but we were only chasing 179 or whatever. I think it was something like that. So the reality is when the proper targets are set, when 9 times out of 10 we're not chasing them. And when we set a proper target, 9 times out of 10 we're not defending that. Do you see what I mean? So I think we struggle because we can't put together all facets of the game on anything approaching a regular basis. And Santoki, I'm going to come back to you now because I want to take you to a talking point that's been dominating the forums and it's been a big cuss out topic over the last week. To the point where even Jared and I had to do a video on it. I just want to see where you stand. Shea Hope, Santoki, in that final ODI batted. So we got to 179 for none by the 35th over, right? Shea Hope at that stage was 51 runs off 101. No, off 51 runs of 102 balls. Santoki, our cricket has got to such a stage. When I went into all the forums and all the cuss out chats, pretty much 90% of people were saying, nah, that knock's fine because at least it set a foundation. So Santoki, we've reached a point in our ODI cricket where our expectations are so low that everyone's going, yeah, 51 from 102 balls. Yeah, that's fine actually, because at least we're not all out for 200. That's where we're at. That if anything puts into perspective where we are at as an ODI team, that sums it up.
Listen, that's why we put Tagenarine Chanderpaul in the A-team ODI side, because we're getting ready. That's the new philosophy for West Indies. Anyone who can stick out 20 overs with the bat, we'll just throw them in the team and take that as the best. But I think, the Shea Hope one's it's a tricky one because I can see both sides of the argument. One, you've got you just need someone to stick around basically and soak up the balls. But at the same time, in 2022, to be going at a 50 strike rate as an opener in the international matches is scandalous. And I think I would say our ODI side is now. Remember building up to the 2015 World Cup in England were kind of like they had Alistair Cook and Jonathan Trott, and they were sort of seeing 300 as their target. And kind of like West Indies, even if they reached 300, you knew it wasn't the par score for that pitch because the players weren't able to play that expansive range. The problem is, West Indies, we don't have the resources that the English Cricket Board had to pile into rebuilding this ODI side. So for West Indies, we just have to sort of trudge on. And I think with Shea Hope, it's acceptable 70, 80 strike rate as an opener is fine because you've got other players who can bat around you. When you're batting at 50, and then Carl Mayers was batting at under a runner ball as well, even though he got a century, you're placing a lot of heavy emphasis on, like, Puran had to basically come out and he played remarkably well, 91 or 55, but how many times is that going to come off? How many times is number 3
Exactly.
going to be able to come in and play that level sustained across an ODI? It's almost impossible. It'll be 1 in 4, 1 in 5 at best. So for me, I think Shai Hope does need to increase the strike rate. It's always going to be a topic, but I just don't know what went in his head at this point. I'd love to know, was it just panic? Was it just he just couldn't play the ball on the pitch? Because we know Shai Hope, he's played T20s, he played in the CPL. He's not a Tejnoan Chandapal classic batsman in that regard. He can accelerate. So towards the latter stages of that innings, when just before he got out, what was going through his head? It'd be interesting to know what was his, was it just I just need to stick around and others will make up for it, or kind of what was the ability? It was a puzzling innings, I would say. And obviously, no discredit to Shai Hope. He's a world-class batsman, one of our standouts in the format. But for me, that was a remarkably bad innings from him.
I think what keeps coming back to me about the ODI side is because obviously the cuss out will return for Phil Simmons. The cuss out would have been ferocious if we'd lost all 3 games, because then we would have set the record, right? But we managed to win the first one to stop the rot. The cuss out will come for Phil. We don't play ODIs again until we go to South Africa next year in March. So there's a long, long wait. And those will be the only ODIs. So 3 ODIs in South Africa prior to the World Cup qualifiers in Zimbabwe in June and July, right? So Phil is likely, you would assume, to still be in post, although his contract actually ends in March 2023. So it's going to be... So actually, I'm going to ask you that question first, actually, before I get to the original point I was going to make, Santoki. Phil's contract actually runs out in March 2023, and I'm not sure how many people know this. What do West Indies do then? Because obviously we would have had the T20 World Cup, and maybe a lot of it depends on what happens in the T20 World Cup. But will they get rid of him in March 2023? And then have to have a new coach, probably an interim coach, take us to the World Cup qualifiers 2 months later, or 2.5 months, 3 months later, in the midst of IPL, or just at the back end of IPL? Who's even going to go to those qualifiers? Because IPL will be going on. It starts in June 18th. Isn't IPL still going on at that point? So, where do you even see that particular stance, Santoki, in terms of what we do head coach wise?
I think you make a valid point. It will be definitely linked to the T20 World Cup, how we perform. If we go out in that first round where we're facing Scotland and Ireland, I think Simmons he'll be forced to leave the job, just because of 2 back-to-back poor World Cup performances, even though we know there are other factors surrounding it. But I can also see as well, if we potentially lose to South Africa badly in March, the thinking might be that someone with fresh impetus might give them some new ideas right on the eve of the World Cup qualifiers, and that might spark them into a change. Because at the moment we're in a rut, and it's easy to blame Phil Simmons, but as you said, that rut's been dating back 7-8 years now, so it's not a short-term rut. But the thinking could be that a fresh person coming into the dressing room might boost morale, might kind of freshen up attitudes and help them in those World Cup qualifiers. So I could see them actually bringing in someone on the eve of the World Cup qualifiers just to add something new if we stick in this rut all the way until March across both white ball formats.
So then in addition to that, the other thing to consider is, say a new head coach. So that's why I asked you the head coach question first. Say a new head coach comes in, though. The problem, Santa. So let's just look at this Kiwi series. You got Hope and Mayers at the top, right? After that, you've got Brooks, King, Carty. Obviously, Pooran's in the middle of all that, and then Jason Holder at 7. Like, how much can a coach change the output from? Like, so Carty's played what, 9 matches now, or maybe had 7 at bats. He's averaging 24. Brandon King's averaging 23. Brooks is averaging 35. Obviously, Pooran's the captain. Holder averages 24. Mayers comes off 1 every 4 innings. Hope bats at a strike rate of 70. Oh, I should also point out that Brandon King, Shamar Brooks, and Carty all bat at a strike rate of 70-something, if not lower as well. Pooran and Mayers are the only 2 in that top 7 who can potentially go at a strike rate approaching 100 or above. There's not a whole lot you can do with that side, Santoki. So get rid of Phil if you want. But what can you even, in the modern era of ODI cricket, what can you even do with that type of side?
Well, this is the thing. I think you've often put on social media, we're essentially an associate side, and we're sort of catfishing as a major nation because I think there's an expectation because we come under the name West Indies, we should be doing well at World Cups and stuff. Whereas, as the reality is, how much can you get out of a Casey Carty? Is he going to go to India and hit a century against India or Australia? It's unlikely. No, I think the trend in the last three, four World Cups, ODI World Cups, has been we generally lose most matches. We'll pick up 2 to 3 wins, and then that will be it. And that's been the trend, since maybe 2007. So that's sort of where we are. I don't know. A head coach, like I said, similar to what you see in football, might be able to provide a short-term boost to players, maybe bring in 1 or 2 new faces and give some new energy. But long-term, it won't change much. As you said, we'll have the same talent pool of players. And we're sounding like broken records at the point because we essentially say this most episodes, but it's true. Our talent pool is so limited. We need to be thinking of a mindset of an associate side at this point. Like Scotland aren't going to think about, if we go to the World Cup, how can we beat most teams? They'll just be like, okay, we're at the World Cup, what can we do? West Indies, we just need to be, at this point, we just need to be grateful if we make the main World Cup and then hopefully pick up 2 to 3 wins. I think thinking, we're the West Indies, we should be doing well in World Cups is long gone. We haven't seen that for the past 15 years. So I think us, and when I say us, I mean the fan base across the region, just need to be realistic where we are. These are the players we got. These are generally, obviously, aside from the likes of Evan Lewis, 1 or 2 players who aren't there, generally these are the best players in the region. And we're putting them in the side. Phil Simmons is an excellent coach. We've got an excellent head coach. The setup is generally well. And this is just the best output we can get from what we've got.
It's just worth adding because it's always important to give context as usual. Because of course, some people listen to this and say, "Nah, you two are talking nonsense. If we get a proper head coach in, whatever that means, things will improve." But it's just worth noting for people. Evan Lewis has currently turned his back on West Indies cricket for whatever reason. Shimron Hetmeyer is in sometimes, he's out sometimes, personal reasons, so on and so forth. Those two are the only 2 batters who have an ODI record of any worth in terms of talking about who would substantially improve our side. Neither one seems to be, quote unquote, fully committed to the West Indies at this point in time, right? So then, Santoki, what you then have to do is say, well, we just played a 3-match ODI, quote unquote, ODI series versus West Indies A versus Bangladesh A. I went and pulled the numbers, Santoki, and these are the top 3 batters in that ODI series. Josh De Silva averaged 36 with a strike rate of 78. Tage averaged 35 with a strike rate of 66. Teddy Bishop averaged 30 with a strike rate of 71. Now, my point is this, Santoki. That's the backup. That's the backup numbers. So when and the thing is, I'm not laughing to cuss anyone. I'm just saying that that's the reality. So when people are saying do this, do that, when Santoki and I say stuff like, boy, the cupboard ain't really saying much. I mean, don't get me wrong. I could work with Josh's numbers. You and I have called for Josh De Silva before.
Yeah.
I could work with that. I could work with a Josh De Silva in the middle, somewhere in the middle, like 4, 5, 6, batting at a strike rate of 78. It's not good enough, but I could work with that. But there's people legitimately calling for Tage, Santoki, and he just played Bangladesh A, and his strike rate was 66. Now, if we're gonna cuss Shea Hope. You can't put Tage in the team then, but that's the backup. Do you see where I'm coming from, Santoki?
Yeah, and there's no quick fix. I know a lot of people will say, "All right, what is your solutions?" In an ideal world, you'd be able to send the West Indies A or emerging side to maybe play in the Royal London Cup in England or something, 50-over competition, or get some experience. We can't do that. We're limited to tournaments within the region. And as you rightly said, Mash, the cupboard is bare. So there's no obvious candidates to come in. There's no one who, I know in most countries you can say, "Oh, why isn't this player been called up? Why haven't they been given an opportunity?" But West Indies, we've literally picked the best players available in the region based on stats and even intuition. So you can throw Tage Narayan Chanderpaul in if you want, but averaging 66 on the A-team ODI series means that generally in internationals, your strike rate goes down even further. So we'll be having 2 openers if he plays with Shai Hope who are getting strike rates of 50 at international level. So there's no quick fix. As rightly said, we're not here to offer solutions as to what West Indies can do or bring back the glory days of the 70s and 80s. I guess what we're trying to say is realistically, this is where West Indies are. We're using the best of our talent pool. We've essentially maximized what talent we have, and it's reached a level where we can't compete with the top nations in ODI cricket.
Yeah, and I think I actually like. I'm sure there'll be some people who will rage at what you said, but I actually like what you said. We now need to put our thinking in the mindset of a top associate side. Getting to the World Cup is now an achievement for the West Indies. That's the reality. That's the harsh reality. Getting there is the achievement. Winning 1-2 games is the achievement. Certainly in ODI cricket. And there was even a couple of people who messaged us saying, you know what, it's as you said, Santoki, it's better we go to the World Cup qualifiers and learn to win some games than go straight into the main draw of the World Cup, lose everything except maybe one game. Then nothing. What did we learn for that World Cup cycle? Nothing. We just
You know what?
so
I would say, you know what? Apologies to anyone who doesn't watch football because you probably wouldn't get the analogy. But I would say, Mash, we're basically like Norwich City fans at the moment. Like,
yeah.
you know, at Norwich are in a championship and they'll score like 100 goals, loving it, winning so many games. And then they come to the Premier League and their fans are like, oh, man, here we go, losing every week. That's essentially what West Indies are, Mash. When you were watching us beat Netherlands 3-0, it was a great time. The fans were loving it. All things were good. Soon as we go to play Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, is man, here we go. More licks. So maybe our lives would be better, a lot stress-free, a lot happier. Mindfulness would be better
Listen,
if we just stick to playing associate sides.
until we beat New Zealand in that first ODI, those Netherlands games were the last time West Indies won. Listen, I saw us at our greatest element this year, you know.
So maybe that's just what we need to do. We just need to stick to playing associate sides, get the feel-good wins, and just don't even worry about World Cups anymore, man.
For real, for real. But ultimately, you know what? And as a way to almost end this episode, this is probably why it's apt then that so many people are talking about future tours program and is ODI cricket gonna die? Because, and here's a controversial statement, Santoki. If ODI cricket died, that's no bad thing for West Indies, you know, because we ain't on anything in ODI cricket. So if that format of cricket is about to die, good, because then we don't have to deal with no more licks and it don't affect us in any shape or form whatsoever.
I think because of how small our talent pool is and the resources we have, we're essentially stretched across 3 formats. So as you said, obviously it'd be a shame. ODI has a long legacy. We won the first ever World Cup in the format. But I think realistically in modern cricket, probably for West Indies cricket, it'd be better to just be able to focus on 2 formats, T20s and Test, and have distinct lines between the red ball and the white ball players. I just think ODI cricket is too much of a burden to add to the region to expect to excel across the format on top of what we do in T20s and Test cricket. So it's unfortunate, but I think that's probably a realistic reflection of kind of the modern game and the economics that go around it.
Most definitely. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as ever for listening to West Indies on 99.94. If you are somebody who is interested in, I guess, wanting to learn a bit more about West Indies and domestic list day cricket, we should be due for our premier list day competition later this year, Super 50. That is scheduled to happen at some point this year. So if you are wanting to message us and say, what about this name? What about that name? Wait for Super 50 to take place and let's see who are the batters in the region who put their name forward. Because right now, going into World Cup qualifiers, there's a whole heap of places that are technically up for grabs. So let's see who shows up at these. If they're not at a T20 franchise competition, let's see who shows up for Super 50 to try and force their way into West Indies selection. But Santoki, that's goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yeah, that's a goodbye. And obviously, it's a hot topic we've discussed. If you've got any comments, opinions, feedback, cusses, just drop them in the comments below on this video on 99.94.
Stay locked in, people.